The Brain That Heals. 3 years ago, as I was at a pond here in Enid, Oklahoma, not to enjoy the water, not to enjoy the evening, but because I had completely lost hope. I believe there was no way forward, no version of me worth saving. What happened that night was a crisis intervention that changed everything. And as I began the road to recovery, I discovered something that science has been quietly proving for decades. The very brain I thought was destroyed was actually capable of healing itself. Today, I want to talk to you about that healing. Specifically, I want to talk to you about neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to rewire itself, and why it matters for anyone touched by addiction. The human brain possesses a remarkable capacity to rebuild, and understanding neuroplasticity reveals why recovery is not just a spiritual hope, it is a scientific fact. Now, you might be thinking, why does this matter to me? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, more than 40 million Americans over the age of 12 has a substance use disorder. That means nearly everyone in this room either knows someone in recovery, loves someone who is struggling, or maybe walking that road themselves. This is not someone else's issue, this is ours. So, here is what we're going to cover today. First, what neuroplasticity actually is and how it works. Second, how addiction physically changes the brain. And third, and this is the part I want you to hold on to, how the brain can heal. Point one, what is neuroplasticity? Let's start at the beginning. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed the adult brain was essentially fixed, that once you reached adulthood, the brain you had was the brain you were essentially stuck with. Norman Dodge, in his landmark 2007 book, The Brain That Changes Itself, describes how this assumption completely collapsed under the weight of new research. What scientists discovered is that the brain is not a static machine, it is a living, adaptable organ that reorganizes itself in response to every experience, every thought, and every behavior throughout our entire lives. The mechanism behind this captured in what neuroscientists call Hebb's rule, which is often summarized simply as neurons that fire together, wire together. When you repeat a behavior or a thought pattern, the neutral pathway associated with it gets stronger, like a trail through tall grass that becomes more defined the more it is walked. This is how we learn languages, master skills, and form habits. It is also unfortunately how addiction takes hold. Point two, how addiction changes the brain. Here's what happens. In the brain, when someone becomes addicted, addictive substances flood the brain's reward circuit with dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, at levels 2 to 10 times higher than any natural reward like food, laughter, or human connection. The National Institute on Drug Abuse explains that over time, the brain adapts to this flood by reducing its own dopamine production and receptor sensitivity. The result, the person can no longer feel normal pleasure without the substance. This is not a character flaw, this is a neuroscience. And again, goes further. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that chronic substances use damages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, judgment, and impulse control. This is why people in active addiction often make decisions that seem completely irrational from the outside. The very mechanism in the brain designed to say stop has been compromised by the addiction itself. When you understand that, you start to replace judgment with compassion. Point three, how the brain heals. Now, here's a part that changed my life when I learned it. The brain can actually heal. With sustained abstinence, the National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that the brain begins to restore dopamine receptors and reconnect damaged neurological pathways. Brain imaging studies show measurable improvements in prefrontal cortex function within just 14 months of sobriety. 14 months. This is not a lifetime, but it is a start. And it is not just time that heals the brain. It is what you fill that time with. Norman Dodd's research shows that structured community, spiritual practice, storytelling, accountability all stimulate neuroplastic changes in the brain. In other words, the very things that programs like Celebrate Recovery are built on, honesty, connection, testimony, accountability, are the exact things science says rebuilds the brain. I've been a part of Celebrate Recovery for 3.5 years now. I've served as a co-chair of men's step study groups, and I can tell you from both personal experience and from the research, connection is not just good for the soul. Connection literally rewires the brain. So let's bring this together. The human brain is not a fixed machine. It is a living, healing organ. Science confirms that what addiction takes, recovery can restore. We looked at neuroplasticity and how neural pathways form. We examined how addiction hijacks the reward system and damages the brain's decision making skills. And we saw that with time, community, intentional practice, that the brain generally heals. My grandfather, Reverend Lauren Jones, used to tell me that integrity was the way and the key to life. I didn't fully understand that when I was younger, but I do now. The word integrity shares its root with the word integrate, to be whole. And what neuroplasticity tells us is that wholeness is not just a spiritual destination, it is a neurological possibility. The brain can be made whole again. And if science can confirm that, then no one, not one person, is beyond hope.